All right, welcome back to this week's episode of Coffee in the Barn. As a follow up to Zimpro's Elevate Women in Ag, we have the keynote speaker here. She gave us a little bit of a fun keynote speech and then led us in the Working Genius workshop. Welcome, Kacee Bohle, to Coffee in the Barn.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for having me on today, Kacee.
Yeah. And I have to tell the audience, I'm Kacee with a C, and she's Kacee with a K, if that helps. So it may be a little confusing of which Kacee that you're asking the question to sometimes, Morgan, but hopefully we'll know the cues.
Sounds good.
But can you walk us through your story? You have an incredible story of why that you shared with the audience at the workshop or Elevate Women Symposium.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for context, I keynoted around balancing work and family at the ZenPro event, Elevate Women in Ag. And it seemed like such a fitting topic because I've lived it, I've breathed it, I've struggled with it. And so, to be able to talk about that to some other people within the ag industry who maybe have also gone through it or are getting ready to, I thought it was a super important topic to talk about for not only being proactive, but also how can we continue to work through this as well. And so just to step back a little bit, my story, if you will. So grew up on a fourth generation row crop farm, West Central Indiana, and worked in the agriculture industry my entire career for the past 14-ish years. And, I've kind of been this little job hopper, if you will. I would spend about 2 years at one job and I'd kind of get through the bright and shiny parts of, a new business or a new company and new job with new clients and new products and new experiences. And then I'd find myself feeling really burnt out and the spark was no longer there. And I always thought it were these like external factors, such as maybe I didn't really actually believe in the product. Maybe it was my work environment. Maybe it was the type of job that I was doing. And all of those factors absolutely applied. And I got really tired of job hopping. And I just thought, man, I really want to find something that aligns with the season of life that I'm in, that brings me some joy and some energy. And it took me on this journey of kind of personal growth and professional development. I took some different leadership courses. I got really self-aware and learned a lot about myself. And we'll talk about this here in a little bit, the Working Genius model. I took a lot of different personality assessments to figure out what type of work does bring me joy. What kinds of things do I need to do that bring me this energy that I'm really good at, but also can pay the bills at the same time. And so essentially over the last probably 4 years, that is where I found my love for coaching, leading people, helping other people solve problems. And it seemed like within the ag industry, a lot of the problems drilled down to the balance between our work life and our personal life. And so the term is balancing work and family, or work-life balance, if you will. And so that's kind of where I specialize. And, knowing that that's something that I struggled with. And they always say, the person that you're best positioned to serve is your past self. I found it very fitting to say, okay, this is something I struggled with. Here's something that I've overcome. And now I want to help other people with that. And so that's kind of what got me to where I am today. And we're probably going to dive into that a little bit further. But, today I work from home. I have my own coaching, speaking, and training business. And I also help my parents farm. We're also homeschooling. My husband has a swing shift job. He also has a hay business. I mean, there's a lot of hats that we wear. And so being able to balance all of those things and kind of find the rhythm that works for us is not only what I have to focus on, but it's also what I help my clients with as well.
I thought you made a good point, and if I remember your presentation a little bit, it's not always the balance that you're looking for. It's not like a 50-50. Like that's what people think of balance, right? But it's really not. It kind of ebbs and flows in where you put your time and energy and passion towards.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest myths, is that we think we have to give an equal amount of time, energy, attention into all the things all the time. But in reality, a healthy work-life balance is putting the right amount of time, energy, and attention into the right things at the right time for the right amount of time. And so that's one of the things that we dove into during that keynote as well. And I think that was probably one of the big eye openers for a lot of people in the room.
Yeah. I think between your conversation and then the keynote panel, I think, and I've done this, is I love the idea of buy back your time, right? And I've had a lot of coaching around that as a business owner, as myself, is what can I pay somebody to do tasks for me to buy back my time? And I'm finally back to the point of saying, no, I can't do it all. And I need a house cleaner. I need some help with Arthur more on a regular basis than just when I travel, and looking at that of like, this shouldn't feel ashamed for wanting somebody to clean my house, or helping me juggle taking my son to different events while I try to work. Because like you, I have my husband who's on a swing shift and he works nights, which is great because he's that emergency childcare provider, and we balance that. And I would say Morgan could probably add in this a little bit because her husband is on it's not necessarily a swing shift, but it's something similar, rotating shift as well.
The shift schedule that changes every single week. Kind of like a firefighter type schedule. But
those schedules are hard.
But at least like with my husband's job, there's predictability in it. So I know exactly, once he's on his shift, I know his schedule for the rest of the year, unless his shift changes or he has to do additional training or something. So for the most part, that helps a lot when it comes to like planning childcare around trade shows or travel meetings and things. So in hindsight, it's kind of a blessing in disguise. He's gone for 48 hours at a time, but when it comes to scheduling extracurricular and work activities, it works out.
Yeah, I think you're so right. It is good to know for planning purposes. It's got its inconveniences, but it also has its perks. And so I think finding those positive things in situations that could be potentially an obstacle, I think are so important. But something you mentioned, Kacee, was like, yeah, we can do it all. It's absolutely possible for us to figure it out, but do we have to do it all? And I think that I struggled with that. That was one of my conditionings growing up. That's my generational trauma that I'm working over is, yeah, I'm an empowered, independent woman. I can do whatever I set my mind to, but do I have to? Do I want to? Do I need to do it all right now? And working through that mindset shift has been pretty crazy of a ride, to be honest with you.
What type of mind shift strategies do you have? Because I'm very much on that same exact trajectory where I'm like, I don't need somebody to do something for me. I can just do it myself. But then also like, I'm soon going to be a mom to 3 kids, 4 and under. Like how, stepping back and being like, okay, what are actually the priorities right now? What do I need to focus on? And learning how to say no, because I've always been one to say yes and help anybody with whatever they want. And kind of setting those boundaries, especially for, working from home and traveling, like, okay, what can and can't I do type thing. So do you have any strategies that I could implement?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you just tiptoed into that right there, right? Is what do you want? What works for you? And I think asking yourself those questions and cutting out the noise of what is everybody else doing, what's worked for everybody else, and saying, is this our reality? Not what does my spouse necessarily want, not necessarily what does my boss want, what does my coworker or my parents, like not necessarily what they all think, need, or want, but what do I think, need, and want right now? What's the season of life I'm in right now? That's all that really matters. I mean, yes, we have to consider other people, right? Like it's important to consider your spouse. It's important to consider your kids. But at the end of the day, my husband doesn't care if I outsource certain parts of things in my business. It's irrelevant to him if I decide to hire a virtual assistant, right? In my business, that's what works. And then in my household, if I need to have a house cleaner come in and help me out one time a month, I can do that. Right now, that doesn't necessarily make sense. But early on, when my little girl was, much younger, I absolutely had some. I mean, it was just my sister coming in. It's not like I had to hire this big crew. It's just, hey, you know what? My sister needs a little extra cash and I need a little help. I'm not too proud to say, come on in. Now, that was something that I had to get over because round one with my first kid, that was something I was like, no, I can do all the laundry. I can do all the dishes. I can cook all the meals. I can be a mom for the first time. And I basically told my mother-in-law to get lost because I didn't want her to think I couldn't hack it. Right? Like she wanted to come in and she wanted to be involved and help out. And I resisted. Mm-hmm. Looking back now, I'm like, I wish I would have accepted that. I wish I would have taken her up on that because again, can we do it all? Yeah. But do we have to? No, you don't. And so I think it's important to ask yourself, what is it that you are willing to automate, delegate, or eliminate off of your plate?
I think some really good points. And we had a little conversation after the event and obviously asked you to be on the podcast, but you hit something really important to me that I appreciated you talking about. And we talked about our businesses and we talked about revenue and profit and, being okay with a certain revenue to pay the bills versus how the world sees business. And if you're not growing, that means you're failing. And it really gave me confidence to say what I want my business to look like and kind of put those things in perspective. Can you kind of talk about that? Because I do that a lot around what is your version of success? And you're touching on that of, yeah, I can do it all, but I don't have to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's super important to talk about, and I'm going to share a story that might help people grasp this a little bit better in case this is the very first time they're introduced to this concept. So there's a story of this businessman who is having a really hectic, crazy day, overwhelmed, totally stressed out, super successful guy though. And he's just he's carrying a lot of weight on his shoulders. And he just decides one day he's going to go down to the beach and go for a walk. And so he goes down to the beach, he's on this walk, and he sees this guy with his family having a little shindig on the beach. And so he goes up to the guy and he, it says well, what are you guys doing? Looks like you guys are having so much fun. And are you going fishing? Because he sees he's kind of getting some of his lines tied up and ready to go fishing. He's like, yeah, we catch a couple of fish, grill out, have some fun here on the beach. And the businessman was like, if you upgraded that fishing pole to XYZ thing, you could catch more fish. And the guy goes, well, why would I want to do that? We catch as much fish as we need to feed our family for this cookout. And the businessman goes, well, because if you catch more fish, then you could sell the fish that you don't eat at the farmer's market. You can make some money. And the guy goes, well, why would I want to do that? And the businessman, because then you could use that money to buy a bigger boat and you wouldn't have to fish on the beach and you could, get even more fish and you could commercialize it. You could sell more fish at more markets and make more money. And the guy goes, well, why would I want to do that? And the businessman, so that way you could hire people to do this work for you. So that way then you could sit on the beach and do whatever you wanted to do and you would make all this money and not have to do any of the work. Again, why would I want to do that? That's what I'm doing now. I'm on the beach. I'm catching just as much fish as I need to satisfy my need right now. And so there's two ways of thinking about that. You could absolutely continue to scale up, work harder, make more money, start to automate systems, sell more places, get more clients, grow your business and scale, hire people to do the job that you once loved to do. Or you can look at it in another perspective and say, is this working for me right now? Is this satisfying the need that I have at the moment? That's okay too. And there's even a whole third perspective that's a little bit of both. There's not a right or wrong way of doing it. And that, again, Morgan, is some of the mindset shifts that I've had to kind of call attention to is, why do I feel this need to continue to scale up, get bigger, do more. Well, I look back at the conditioning that I had growing up, and it's like, if you're sitting around not doing anything, that must mean you're lazy. There's no time for rest. If you have time to watch TV, you have time to work on some piece of equipment. You have time to do more chores, right? And that defined who we were. That defined our level of productivity and our level of success. And so that's where I see so many people struggling with this work-life balance, because in one ear, we have people saying you're not doing enough. And then in the other ear, we have people saying, rest, take care of your mental health, slow down, enjoy life. Life is short. You may not get another chance. Your kids are going to be grown soon and you won't have this back, right? And so we're constantly struggling with this tug of war. And I say work-life balance very loosely, because I don't think it is an equal balance, right? And so when we hear balance, that means you're balancing things, right? Like if it's out of balance, we're not using the word balanced. And so we struggle with that. But at the end of the day, you need to look at, what season of life are you in? What are your values? What are you willing to do and not do? What's important to you? Who is important to you? And that doesn't look like anybody else.
No, and I love how you said it. And hopefully the women who've asked me for advice can hear it from you as well. Because I do get women like me, we're very driven, right? We want to excel. I wanted to be VP of a company, and I gave myself a title of president in my own company when I started it at one. So yeah, whatever, I got the title. But so many people are like, my kids are young. How do I do that versus I want to promote my career? And I'm like, well, these promotions or these different jobs come with more travel. And it's just, to me, weighing the importance of being there when your kids are young versus when your kids are older. And I'd say this is only a woman issue, but now I'm meeting men who, are very successful in their career. And I won't say his name on here, but, a very successful person who's not going to take a full-time role as a professor and work part-time on his business so he can be home with his children while his wife got her dream job. And so they're moving universities and things. And I'm like, wow, I love to hear this, that, it's not just women thinking about this, but also men in the season of life and what works, because he doesn't have anything else to prove to people. He's top of his field, PhD, and there's so many women out there, I think, that get guilt to say, because I have a PhD, I should be at this level. My male peers are at this level. And a lot of times we don't go back and look at the peers that are in the levels we want to achieve or where we think we should be. What have they done so they can be there? Because it's probably not sitting at home with their family as much as you think it is. And they're probably not running the kids to soccer practice. And they're probably not, cleaning the house and preparing meals all the time. And so I think it's so important. And I love how you, touch on that what does it look like for you? Because you
love that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can't eat all raw vegetables, home cooked meals, and have your kids in 3 sports.
Yeah. And I think that's a very common conversation that, like, my husband and I have just had within the last year or so is, he works 2 days on, 4 days off. Every week it changes. So the 4 days a week that he is home, he's a stay-at-home dad. He could be pursuing a master's or going to school to do something else or starting his own business, but we both agreed that at this point in time, it's probably best that one of us, either if I'm home or he's home, we're able to balance childcare with the help of family as well. But him being home with the kids at this time is probably the best bang for our buck we're going to get, being that they are so young before school. And so that's something that I've toggled with too, is like, okay, I work full time, but how do I balance being home? How much do I travel? But the days that my husband is home with the kids, okay, can I schedule meetings around their nap schedule so things aren't that chaotic, but I also get to go on a walk with them on my lunch? Or feed them breakfast in the morning. You know, I'm able to take time throughout my day to play with them when they're home with us. So as of right now, we kind of have the best of both worlds. But being able to find that balance is, you know, like you said, it's different for everyone.
Yeah. Well, and Kacee, you hit the nail on the head when you said, like, we had a point to prove, right? And I think so many of us, myself included, I had this point to prove, right? I got to get out of this small town. I got to go make something of myself. I want to climb that corporate ladder. I'm a woman in a male-dominated industry. I have got a point to prove. And if you fail at that, then what does that mean about you? If you didn't climb all the way that you said you were going to climb, what did that mean of you? And I don't think that that's a thing. Nobody is keeping score. Nobody is tracking everything that you're doing that closely to be like, oh, she posted she was going to do this thing on social media and she didn't actually do it. Like, this is a big deal, breaking news, right? Like, most of us are not that important to where so many people are keeping score of what we're doing. Now, obviously, when you're a big name in an industry or somebody famous, people are keeping closer tabs on that. But the majority of us can let that pressure go. Let that responsibility expectation go, because nobody's keeping score. And even if they are, like, don't you have anything better to do?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, it sounds like there's a much bigger problem here than what I'm facing. And so I think you're so right. Like, we do have this point to prove. And I was that same person. I climbed the corporate ladder. Like, what does it mean for me to leave this company that I have worked my way up the ranks in? Like, I have a pretty great looking resume. I, have a lot of skills and certifications. Like, am I just throwing it all away to come home and be with kids and put all of my risk into a business that may or may not go anywhere? I don't know. I don't want to sit around and not know. So it was worth the risk to me. And so I think that's something that you have to look at, or what are the pros and cons? What's the weight here in this season of life? Maybe my husband does need to be home with the kids more, so I can go off and scratch the itch that I have. I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. That happened for us too. There were several years where my husband was home with the kids and I was up and down the roads of the Corn Belt working. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's no longer the season of life I'm in. It wasn't easy to transition my mind to keep up with our reality, but that's the reality. And you know what I mean? Like, you get to decide what that means for you. It looks different for everybody. And I think the moment you pull yourself out of the got to fit into this box, got to look like them, got to make sure that I'm fulfilling everybody else's expectations, is the moment you start to have some relief and some freedom. And so, yeah, you absolutely have to do that work to figure out what's important to you right now.
Does the Agriminds play into the Working Genius? Or no?
So Agriminds is like a 12-week group coaching program, and we do have Working Genius inside of that, but they are kind of two different avenues.
Okay. So, yeah. So I know during the Elevate Women in Ag, Kacee, you spoke on the Working Genius program, and you are a coach, certified coach, and you offer this through your workshops and training. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what exactly that program is and how you incorporate that into your teachings?
Absolutely. So part of, becoming a coach, I wanted to put some tools in my tool belt to help my clients. And, I've gone through several different personality assessments through my different roles that I had in my career. Like, I would go through sales trainings and I would take DISC assessments and Myers-Briggs, and I even did color. And personally, I did the Enneagram test, right? There's tons of different things that you can do to kind of just understand yourself better. And I thought all of them were a great layer to understand yourself better. But what I found to be kind of my favorite is this model called the Working Genius. And so the first portion of the day at ZenPro Elevate Women in Ag event was focused on balancing work and family. Then we transitioned into the panel discussion. And then we transitioned into the Working Genius workshop. And why I feel it is so important to kind of tack on to that to kind of combine them together, or at least talk about both things, is because if we're thinking about balancing work and family, right? Like we're trying to figure out how can we earn an income and fill our cups up, find some energy, right? And the Working Genius model is a really cool tool that can help us not only align our passions with our paycheck, but help us fill our cup up outside of work and inside the office as well. So the Working Genius model essentially is there are 6 types of geniuses that most people have 2, right? Like we're really heavy on 2 geniuses. 2 geniuses we're like, oh, I can do, but if I do too much of it, it's kind of going to burn me out. And then 2 other geniuses that really drain you and frustrate you. And so why we talked about the Working Genius at this event was to say, okay, if we are prioritizing some personal time, or if we're prioritizing ourselves in some capacity, wouldn't it be great to know what filled our cup up? Wouldn't it be great to know what types of work bring us joy and that really just come naturally to us, so that way we can utilize them both at home and at the office? And so we talked about the Working Genius workshop. We went through the model, and everybody in the audience took the assessment. You can find it at workinggenius.com and take the assessment there. But what I thought was really cool during that workshop is so many people were like, wow, I knew I was good at this thing, but now it makes sense why it frustrates me to do it. Because especially here in ag, right? It doesn't matter if it brings you joy, work has to get done. Sometimes we don't enjoy it, but we've become good at it. And so the Working Genius model has helped us say, oh, here's what my natural skills and abilities are. Here's what I can bring to the table that fill my cup up. And here's the things that don't necessarily come naturally to me. So how can I build a language around that, have an ability to increase the awareness about that around myself, but also around my team too. So we can work a little bit more cohesively. We can put the right types of tasks onto the right type of people. We know when to pull certain people into what stages of work. And so, yes, I utilize that tool with my one-on-one coaching clients. I utilize it inside of my group coaching program called AgriMinds. And then I also do Working Genius workshops like I did at Elevate Women in Ag. I go to a lot of different agriculture companies and organizations, do these workshops with their team, help managers hire more effectively and intentionally, and put the right types of projects and tasks on the right employee. So that way the work-life balance is in. Right? Like, wouldn't it be great if I could work smarter and get things done more productively, maybe even faster, so that way I have more time for family at home? How do I delegate appropriately so that way my team is feeling utilized, my team is feeling fulfilled and energized? We're able to communicate with someone so that way it's like there's not a misunderstanding of, do we go ahead and do the work, or are we just in the brainstorming stages? And so I utilize that tool in pretty much every conversation that I have. And it was so good to hear the aha moments that people had after the workshop at that event. And it's been such a powerful tool in people's marriages too. Like, oh, that's why my husband does this thing, or that's why my employee does this thing, or this is why I don't really see eye to eye with so. It makes so much sense. So yeah, it's one of my favorite tools to utilize.
Well, that was a great snippet. And I would say participating in the event, it changed things for me. And in the last episode, I told Kaylee, I said, I made my whole team take it.
Oh, did you really? That's awesome.
Yeah. And kind of the transition, you obviously can see your shirt in Maxwell Leadership. And that was something I was working on. And I do read his books and I follow him and the team and all the stuff they put together. What are all the things that you can offer for our audience, either from a business perspective, from like team leaders to the individual?
That's a great question. So Maxwell Leadership, for those who don't know, John Maxwell is kind of like the leadership guru. He's the personal and professional development and growth guru. And so if you don't know who he is, I highly encourage you to check him out. tons of free resources online, lots of different books that you can use for your own personal development and for leadership. And so several years ago, when I was kind of dipping my toe into how can I grow and just be better in my career, I took a leadership program through our county, which was through Purdue Extension, and it was called Leadership Vermilion County. And it really just kind of opened my eyes to what leadership was, which I was very wrong about. And I had a really skewed perception of what leadership was, and I got to experience what it was. And I was like, wow, this is powerful. And so I kind of got hooked on leadership development. So I started taking some masterminds and participated in different programs around leadership. And I found out who John Maxwell was, and eventually got connected with some of the leadership team at Maxwell Leadership, which wasn't called that when I joined. It was called John Maxwell Team, I think, at the time. And so I've been around the block a little while with them. And I joined Maxwell Leadership just to take it back to my team. How can I be a better manager? How can I coach my clients through some of the things that they're working on? I found myself being the kitchen counselor a lot, right? Going on farm, working with clients on different things. And I ended up just kind of being put in these counselor positions. Like sometimes those are the only people that they see other than their employees is their sales reps or, some of the reps that they have in different businesses. And I found myself feeling not qualified to have some conversations, but I wanted to figure out how I could support them. How could I coach them? How can I help them make decisions that they feel empowered to make? And so that's why I got into leadership development through Maxwell Leadership. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and become a certified coach. So became a certified coach. It's been almost 5 years now, I think. And when you become a coach, you get licensed to do tons of different things. So the amount of access that I have that I can offer companies is vast, but the ones that I do offer right now, I focus on Working Genius, Agriminds, and one-on-one coaching. And so what that looks like today is, depending on like if you're an entrepreneur or if you want to invest in yourself personally, we do one-on-one coaching. If you are a company that wants to invest in some of their managers or their staff in some capacity, I get hired on by companies to train, coach, and lead some of their executive teams. And then I also have people who come in and do the group coaching, which is in Agriminds. And I take all of the information from all of the different resources, not just within Maxwell Leadership, but all the different things that I have experienced and been trained on in other capacities, and I tailor it to the ag industry. And I think that's the important piece, because so often, like I remember going through different sales trainings in my career, and I'm like, okay, but have you ever tried to pull that off with a farmer? Like they could see right through that script, or like there's no way you could say that to somebody within the ag industry. Like that sounds really slimy. And so I've taken some of the learnings and experience that I've had, I've tailored it to the agriculture industry. And what I'm finding is that most coaches don't always have that experience. So other companies within the ag industry that I've worked with that are like, yeah, we used to have this executive coach, but they didn't really understand what I meant when I said blah, blah, blah. And you get that. And so that's what kind of sets me apart from other coaches. And I do know that coaches in the ag industry exist, and I love that. And I think there needs to be more of them. So if that's something that you need coaching around or you're curious about, I want you to call me, because I think more people like me need to be available within this industry. There's no way that I could serve everyone, but I just wish that I had someone like me when I was starting off in my career, or when I was trying to transition from, going from career to business owner, or, deciding to make certain pivots within my career. I wish that I had someone to bounce those ideas off of that understood what it was like to be in this industry. So that's a little bit about what I offer without going too in depth or boring anybody.
Well, I would say you also do speaking events, which I would highly recommend. I keep posting that on LinkedIn. If you're looking for somebody to be a keynote speaker, Kacee is your person. And so hopefully people are paying attention to that as well, because you only gave tidbits of what you offered, of your journey, your story, and then Working Genius. But incredible experience. We appreciate having you on the Coffee in the Barn, and we appreciate what you're giving to the world of agriculture.
Well, thank you so much for saying that, because what I think is important to call out is I didn't set off to be a speaker, right? And I think that's important for people to understand, is that when you follow the nudge to do something, steps just kind of happen to align after that. When you step into your purpose, things start to align. And for so long, I've resisted talking about what I talk about because it's not common, it's uncomfortable, it's tough. This is the stuff most people don't want to talk about. Most people don't want to admit that they don't have it figured out. Most people don't want to admit that they're struggling with certain things, which is kind of where I specialize, right? Like I have a thing, like I help people talk about the things that they don't want to talk about and work through that. And so when I set off to be a coach, in that season of my life, it worked really well with what I had going on at home with young kids and being home and not having to travel, because I didn't want to travel. I wanted to be home more. And so doing coaching online via Zoom worked well for me. Just like you mentioned, Morgan, right now, like I have this flexibility that I didn't have when I was doing the corporate shit. I didn't have that. I couldn't just be home and be in Kentucky at the same time. And so now I have this flexibility. But now that my kids are older, my husband has a new job and kind of have a support system around that I didn't have when we lived in a different place. I have the flexibility to travel more. And somebody else asked me, they're like, so how do you find clients? How do you find these speaking opportunities? And I'll just say, like, every single thing every client, every opportunity that I've ever been presented with has been word of mouth. And so when you hone in on the thing that you are, I would not call myself an expert, but the thing that you are passionate about, the thing that you know about, the thing that you've lived and have experienced, it all kind of comes together. And so it's not natural to me to talk about being a speaker, because that's not what I set out to be. That's not what I set out to do. It has kind of formed from the coachings that I do. And so it feels really like imposter syndrome still to call myself a professional speaker when that's not what I thought I was going to be doing. But it has become something that I could have never imagined. It has almost become something I do more of than coaching, because I can say yes to certain events. It's not, I can make more money in one short amount of time versus 6 months with coaching, right? Like, so my season of life, I'm starting to see shift and I'm doing more and more speaking. But again, that wasn't what I set out to do. And so it's still foreign to me. And I think it's important to call that out, because again, if we're thinking about the transitions of our season of life and seeing changes in our business and changes in our roles and our careers, it may not be something that you expected or planned on doing. But when you take one step, the next step is going to become clear to you. And that's kind of what's happening to me right now. And so it's so much fun. So thank you for calling that out and letting me provide some context around that.
Well, thank you, Kacee, for being on Coffee in the Barn. And it's always a pleasure. Hopefully we'll have you back in the future as well. But before we go, one last thing, how do they reach you? Via social media, email, website? How do they find you?
Well, if you're on Instagram, I'm Ag Coach Kacee. And what you'll find there is a very stagnant profile. I encourage you to go look at it, because it's not like anybody else's profile on Instagram. But you can find me there. I'm very active in stories. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So Kacee Bohle, which I'm sure you'll spell out in the show notes. That's probably where I hang out the most, is Instagram and LinkedIn. Or you can visit kaceebohle.com.
Awesome. Thank you.